April 27th, 2024. The week after the severe second winter, unfortunately, we've seen many damages everywhere in Europe. Crops have been in fact affected by frost, by temperatures below zero, by snow, and it's not only wine that suffered, it's strawberries, apples, and all this other kind of stuff. And one more time, we see that climate change is happening, and the moving north with vines, with vineyards, doesn't solve the problem at all. Next to this sad topic, we will also talk about positive things for the future of winemaking regarding agriculture, regenerative farming strategies, and we will dive deeper into the world of brands and celebrities. Have fun, even though it was a tough week for all of us. Welcome to the Pinot Pixel podcast episode number 152. The week after the second winter this year, unfortunately, many crops have been damaged, and we have seen it all over the place, in social media, in the news, newsletters, everywhere. And just to give you a feeling of what has happened in the last couple of days, I just took some screenshots from Instagram, from TikTok, and all this kind of stuff. What we can see right now at the moment is a picture of fires burning in one of the most famous vineyard sites in Germany. It's the Schlossberg in Klingenberger Schlossberg, very famous for Pinot Noir Précoce and Pinot Noir. And they have struggled with frosts, unfortunately, temperatures below zero that have affected the vines. This one is cherry trees from Poland, and they have also been affected. They tried to fix it with lighting fires as well. It's a quite common technique, and the idea behind is just to increase the temperature in the vineyards or in the fields just for, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 degrees to keep it above zero, to not get the damage due to the frost. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So this is a video from the cherry trees in Poland. What we can see here is vineyards in Bordeaux. They had the same issue April 22nd. And then, of course, also the other crops were affected. This is a video from a German news show on TV, the Hessenschau. And they were talking about vines. They were talking about strawberries, apple trees. Everything was affected this week. And we saw same issues in Burgundy, in Champagne. We heard news from northern Italy where kiwis are planted, so kiwi trees that have been affected. Dominio de Pingos shared news in Spain. They were affected. The apricots in Austria. Austria is quite famous for their apricots, the tiny ones, the Marillen, as they call it in Austria. And a region called Styria in Austria that not only had to deal with frost, but also with snow. They had a huge amount of snowfall at the beginning of the week, and right after that, frost came, and many vines have been damaged. At the moment, nobody can really tell what has happened. They will figure it out. They will have a look at the vines, at the trees, at the plants, and I guess in the next couple of days we will hear more about the final damages. Some winemakers from Franken, friends of mine, told me that it's between 60 and 90% of loss just for this year, and it could only get worse. So we pray for all the people working in agriculture. And as I said, this shows what power nature really has and what climate change does with our agriculture, with our environment. And this will happen way more often in the future, unfortunately. Another thing that was quite often in the news this week was the news that the cover producer Freixenet has to temporarily lay off 80% of its workers. The reason for that is the drought. There is lower yields in Penedès and the whole area where the cava is produced. And there is a law in Spain saying that you are allowed to temporarily lay off due to some unforeseen conditions, something like that. You're allowed to temporarily lay off your co-workers to keep the, let's say, system sustainable, even though it's not the best, but just to keep a company alive, you are allowed to do that. And they said, we will do that. We have to do that due to the drought for 80%, with 80% of our co-workers. This means over 600 people won't be able to work this year at Freixenet. Freixenet is the first company in the area to do that, and it's also said that many other companies will follow, because it's not only a thing that affects Freixenet, it's also a thing for all the wineries in the region. And if labor costs are a big amount of your costs in general in the company, it's definitely a thing you have to think about, and many other companies will do as well, according to this news from Reuters. After those bad news, let's switch to some good news, some quite funny news as well. There was an article on Share Sheep. The article was called Forget Carpools, These Oregon Wineries Share Sheep. What is behind this story? There's many wineries that work together in Oregon. They share things they could share, and we're not talking about tractors, we talk about sheep. The sheep they share are used for regenerative farming, meaning they mow the grass in between the vines, and what happens is that they not only eat the grass, so they mow, let's say, in a natural way, they also replace tractors, and they are lighter than tractors, so the soil is not compressed in a way that the tractor would do it. You have natural fertilizer because they pee and they poo in the vineyards. This is the second fact. The third fact is you don't need herbicides to cut the grass, to get rid of the grass, and you won't need fuel for the tractors. And in addition, of course, they are way cheaper than a tractor. But another thing that was mentioned in this article that was really surprising to me, it's also kind of an educational aspect that comes into play, because people see sheep in the vineyards, they start asking questions. Sheep is an animal that people like, so what they see is a growth in wine tourism. There is more bookings for tours, for trips, for tastings, for hotels, for wellness and spa. So sheep are also attracting more customers, and this was really interesting to me. And it's a good project. It's a positive project. Started in Oregon. They started with 14 winemakers this year, and they expect 46 wineries to participate next year. Quite cool, quite interesting. And we have talked about sheep in vineyards, I guess 2 or 3 times in the last couple of months on that podcast. And because some people say, wait a minute, when they eat the grass, how do you prevent them from eating the canes and the leaves and also the grapes? There's 2 different ways to deal with that. One is you only use them in the early process where they don't eat the leaves and all that stuff. So between, November and March, for example. So before flowering and all this kind of stuff that will happen with the vines. Or you use special sheep breeds that are lower than the average height of a vine, where the heart sits and the canes then start growing the leaves and the grapes. So they are not even able to reach leaves and grapes. So basically, this is the 2 main ways I know. And I mean, of course, you can try to prevent them from eating grapes, but I mean, grapes are delicious. Leaves are delicious for them as well. So it might be a good idea to either go the way ending in March or using smaller sheep so they are not able to reach it. Another positive news this week from England. Denbies Wine Estate is now certified as Net Zero. So they underwent a certification that proves that they sequester more CO2 than they emit. And what they do basically is they have a look at all the processes, how many CO2 is produced, how many CO2 is sequestered. And then in the end, they draw a line and say, okay, your balance is net positive or net negative. And there, the Denbies Wine Estate were 96 kilos net negative. So in the end, they are certified as Net Zero. There's only a few wineries on the planet that have done this certification. For example, Fetzer Vineyards in the US or Ross Hill. So quite famous ones, quite big ones. And Denbies is the first to do so in the UK. So congrats to Denbies Wine Estate. I have never been there. I recently heard a podcast on Denbies, and I definitely want to go there. And probably it will be possible this year in November on our annually wine trip with people who are interested in English wine. So if you want to be part of this trip, just let me know. Hit me up, podcast@pinotpixel.com, and we'll see if there's still space available. It's currently planned for 7th to 10th of November. So let me know if you want to be part of it, and probably we will be able to visit Denbies Wine Estate. We stay in the UK. Funny things happened this week as well, and this happened after a tough fight between Guinness and Heineken. Guinness announced that they have closed a major deal for the next 4 years, over 40 million pounds, so about 48 million euro, $50 million, for sponsoring the English Premier League. And this has been on the news before because the last sponsor was Abinbev with Bud, but they didn't want to prolong. So the Premier League said, no, we don't want to work with them anymore. So there was a new tender for the Premier League. And in the end, it was just Guinness and Heineken. And Guinness finally won. So they will be able to sponsor with the upcoming season from 2024-2025 the English Premier League. And this is quite interesting because we already talked about the quite close connection of beer and sports in the UK. And Guinness is not only a well-known brand, it's also the company that really pushes this 0.0, so the alcohol-free beverage segment with their Guinness, what is it called? Guinness 0.0, I guess, or something like this. And what will happen after the deal, of course, is also more visibility for Guinness everywhere in the UK and probably over the borders as well. And of course, and this is what they also expected, a growth in sales. This is what usually comes with it in a positive way. If you don't make failures in marketing communication, as we have seen it last year, unfortunately, with Bud Light. Still, in the UK, Aldi was on our news, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks ago with their new wine campaign, and they have another thing going on. Aldi has announced the Wine of the Week series. So they will promote a wine each week to push wine sales all across the country. And this is quite interesting because usually or beforehand, Aldi was only advertising wine on seasonal occasions, for example, Easter or Christmas or New Year's Eve. But right now they say we want to push our wine sales and we do this every single week from now on. And there is some quite interesting prices every now and then between, usually it's the area between 5 and 10 pounds. So up to, let's say, 15 euro, I would say. And sometimes there is 60% discount on wines. And this could be very interesting for people who try to get closer to wine, for example, or who don't want to spend a high amount. I can't tell you enough about the wine quality that is available on shelves in Aldi UK. In Germany, usually it's very, very entry level. I mean, there is some more expensive bottles up to probably 20, 25 euro, but this is the cheap version of usually high quality wines. So I would, for example, because I had this with a friend a week ago, Barolo, entry level Barolo, good Barolo, start between 35 and 40 bucks. And you can buy Barolo for 18 bucks. But I usually say this is the grapes that, however, made it through the certification of the DOC or the DOCG in that case, just to be called Barolo. So you have a huge label on the wine bottle saying Barolo. You can spot it from 5 meters away and there's nothing else. So basically it's advertised through the name Barolo, but you can be quite sure that this is still of low quality. So what I wanted to say is I have no clue what is going on with wine in the UK. Would be very interesting. I will check that out because I will be in the UK at the end of May. In Germany, I won't recommend to buy wine there, but this is just my personal opinion. One more thing from the UK. Oh, there was a lot going on in the UK this week. Alcohol Change UK is the company that has started the Dry January movement 10 years ago. What started as a well-made marketing campaign turned out to be a very, very big movement all over the planet in a good way. And what also came along with that is that brands, liquor brands, wine brands started to use Dry January for their marketing as well. It was not a term that was protected. It was just a term used by Alcohol Change UK and it became viral. It went viral. Everybody was using it. Go on dry January with us. If you don't want to have a super dry January, drink our low alcohol wine, stuff like that. So Alcohol Change UK tried to win a court case on the protection of the term dry January. So brands are not allowed to use it for advertisement, especially when they usually sell alcohol, and they're lost. Why is that? It is said that dry January has gone viral, and the term dry January contributes in a positive way to the no-low movement, and it's still intended to say, even though it's not, organized or marketed by Alcohol Change UK themselves, when brands use the term, this is said to be meant positively. Let's put it like this. That was a good quote, I would say. Many of the brands that have used the term are pretty much aligned with Alcohol Change UK on the need for effective work towards reducing alcohol harm, so it makes sense to work together and not put up unnecessary barriers. And I mean, the reason for going out with a quote like this was that he sees dry January as the generic within the low and the no alcohol sector. It has become a generic. So people use it for symbolizing it's low in alcohol or it's no alcohol. Some people would say that this is a loss for the category. I think it's a win because, I mean, on the one hand, it has become a movement and way more people are talking about reducing their alcohol consumption or even not drinking at all. And on the other hand, I think that Alcohol Change UK won't be able to push the brand dry January and everything that comes along with it in a way that we can all do this together as a society, as a segment, as a business, as an industry. I would say it's okay. If they would have won in front of the court, the Italian minister Lollobrigida might have a solution for you how you can solve the problem of not using dry January. He said, if a wine is made with alcohol, you can call it wine. If not, in a different way. And what he wanted to state with that is, we have had over 3,000 years of tradition, of experience in winemaking. It became part of our culture. And today, when people talk about wine, what they usually mean is fermented grape juice with alcohol. So if we just put out the alcohol out of this beverage, we should not be allowed to call it wine because people associate it with culture, with tradition, with alcohol. I get it. I get the statement. And I think it could be an option for the future to have a category that has its own name. I mean, it hasn't been called wine 3,000 years ago. It was probably fermented grapes. I don't know. I think when it becomes a big thing, a movement, such as it happened with beer in the 90s. And I mean, we also talked about that. Every 10th beer in Germany is alcohol free. Can you imagine the amount of wine in Italy? And you know that you could sell 10% more when there's the alcohol-free option labeled as de-alcoholized wine or alcohol-free wine. I guess they would also jump on that train. And I mean, every one of us has his or her opinion on alcohol-free products, and this is totally fine. My thing or my discussion I sometimes have with friends, with colleagues, is that I might seem a bit too focused on non-alcoholic products and they feel that I'm heading towards this dogmatizing. I don't. What I want to do, what I want to state is there is a demand for alcohol-free products and there is a business behind it. And if you don't see the options of the business feeding the demand and of course getting by accident this society healthier, I would say you're an idiot. I mean, you can still, we should drink wine. Wine is an amazing product. And there is reasons why it has been part of our culture for so long. And there are reasons why it will be for the next hundreds and thousands of years. It's totally fine. But it's a business opportunity. It's a good product. The products will get better in the future. So we will see an increase as well on production and on sales. So maybe it's an option to find a way to sell it under a different name. But in the end, if you have the possibility to sell more with the name de-alcoholized wine, alcohol-free wine, I guess you will do it. Maybe it will take Italy a little while longer to adapt to the alcohol-free movement. And this is also totally fine. I recently did the recap on Vinitaly on the Double O podcast, where we talked about what we have experienced and felt during Vinitaly, and they probably stick a bit more to tradition than others do, but in the end it's totally fine. And we will also see alcohol-free products in the next 10 years coming up. In Italy, we do a little step to the west, to France, where Pernod Ricard is trying to acquire a 280 hectare domain estate in Provence. And if they manage to do so, this will result in a 500 hectares area for producing rosé wines. They already have an estate over there with over 200 hectares. Santa Margherita, I hope it's pronounced correctly. Sainte Marguerite, okay, it's the French version. Sainte Marguerite with over 200 hectares. And they produce 3 different wines, Symphonie, Fantastique, and Marguerite. And those 3 retail about between 20 and 55 euro, something like this. So it's the premium segment. I won't put it luxury segment as they did it in this article, but it's a premium segment on rosé wines. And of course, they will be able to produce way more bottles of this one after having acquired this estate. And it's one more step further for Pernod Ricard, showing that they will focus on premium products, on premium wines. And they already stated that several months ago, and they stick to their plan. The next news came from the US, from Napa Valley, and this was also quite interesting for me because I will be in Napa Valley in August, and what I did is I applied. But what did I apply for? Napa Valley crying out for volunteers is the name of the article. This sounds a bit needy, but what they wanted to say in this article is Napa Valley suffers from people working in the wine industry, assisting in winemaking and in wine tourism and all this kind of stuff. So what they did is they launched a program together with the Center for Volunteer and Nonprofit Leadership, the CVNL, with the idea of finding people who want to work at least 24 hours as a volunteer for wineries, for wine producers, and generally in the wine region of Napa Valley. So what I did is I jumped on their website and I looked for wine and vine for both of them. And there were 2 programs currently running. One was focused on a wine music festival in the vineyards in August. And the other one was more focused on, what was the other one? Building a wine trail in Napa Valley. And I applied for both of them. And let's see what will happen. I will be there for almost 3 weeks. And maybe I will get the chance to help them with their needs and also to discover Napa Valley a bit in parallel. I will keep you updated on that podcast, but it's quite interesting to see that. And I mean, it's a good way to find people who are interested in wine, who maybe sometimes ask themselves, how can I get at least 1 foot in the wine industry without applying for a big company of stuff like that, some kind of an internship. And this might be an opportunity for you. So if you are either living in Napa Valley or close to it, or you will spend some weeks or months in the area, just help the wine industry a bit in the programs that I have set up. We will end the episode with 2 funky, fancy, and funny news and 1 celebrity that has launched his new project. We start with the e-tongue that outperformed humans in detecting contaminated wine. So what has happened? There's a machine at Washington State University that is served with wine samples, and 1 week after the contamination of those wine samples, the machine was already able to state whether it's mousy or faulty in general. And this process is quite fast compared to humans, because humans usually take, according to the study they made, up to 4 weeks to discover this contamination. And this study shows that on the one hand, machines, of course, are way less influenced by the environment. And on the second hand, there is not a subjective threshold that every single human has in detecting flavors, aromas, tastes, whatever, stuff like that. And in addition, they also wanted to state that the idea of this study was not to show that you can replace people working in the wine industry with machines, but to discover some issues sooner. So the machine is more set to be an assistant, a future assistant for winemakers, and people working in the wine industry. And to me, it's an interesting thing. It's a good idea. And there is several movements in the future, especially to deal with contaminated wine, and especially in this area of natural wines, where sometimes people argue with each other if this is still natural, in quotes, quote unquote, or if this is already faulty. And I mean, sometimes it's easier to detect faults, and sometimes it isn't. And it's a good way to find out earlier that your wine might be doing things that he should not in the bottle. Second thing, and I really laughed about that, even though it's not really funny, there was a guy caught up by the police while drunk driving. And this happened in April and in May 2 years ago. And he was above the allowed level of alcohol in the blood alcohol. They took his driver's license. So he went to court proving, I only drank very, very few, and something could not be correct. And then they found out that he belongs to a very, very small amount of people living on this planet that suffer from something called auto brewery syndrome, ABS, or gut fermentation syndrome, GFS. So what basically happens is that his body goes into a metabolic condition that starts producing alcohol in his stomach. So for example, when he eats, I don't know, carbohydrates, bread, noodles, whatever, pasta, pizza, his body starts producing alcohol. And of course, also this affects the blood alcohol level. And in the end, even though you just drank one beer, the police says, sorry, man, this is way too much for driving. And I mean, being caught is the one thing, yes, but unfortunately, of course, this fermentation in his gut also causes things that you usually have when you drank too much. So you have a loss of your motor functions and you have slurred speech. And I mean, while driving a car, this could be very dangerous for the other people driving along the same road with you in parallel. So in the end, he was fortunate to be acquitted. But what he has to do right now is he had to install a so-called alcohol lock in his car. So what basically happens is when he, I don't know, whatever he has done, when he enters the car and he wants to start the engine, he has to blow in this machine. And if the alcohol lock detects that there is more than the allowed level of blood alcohol, the car won't start. Quite interesting. This should be used not only for people suffering from one of those illnesses, but also for some people I know that are really into drunk driving. I hate this kind of stuff. There is reasons. Many people have reasons to do that. To me, there is no single logical reason to do so. So don't drink and drive, ladies and gentlemen. And Celebrity Corner. In the end, quite interesting. Ryan Reynolds acquired a stake of a gin brand 6 years ago, and in July his new movie Deadpool will come to movie theaters. So what he did is he launched the Aviation American Gin branded in let's say the Deadpool look and feel. It will be 6 different bottles available in stores. Usually the Aviation Gin is a white bottle, and this one is branded black and red, so basically in the look and feel of Deadpool. The interesting thing in this marketing campaign is the price for the bottle for this special edition will exactly be the same, so between 20 and 30 bucks depending on where you get it. The same price like the normal one. And this is quite interesting. So you just push it, you just push sales through the celebrity bag to the visibility you have through a movie, and of course through marketing in general. Quite interesting. Special edition at the same price like the normal product, and this will definitely boost sales. I'm quite sure. And the price to me feels quite affordable. I can't say anything about the quality, but a $25 bottle of gin, celebrity bagged, nice look and feel. Yeah, I get it. Nothing I would try, I guess, because I'm not a huge gin drinker in the US, but there's other projects on my list as well. This is it, guys. Episode number 152 of Pinot and Pixel. Thank you very much for listening. If you like what you hear, recommend this podcast to a friend. Have a great weekend. See you next week on Wednesday. Ciao, ciao.